Hey everyone, it's Eric from foundersbeta.com, and I'm so delighted to have the founder of Prelo, Prelo.io, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much. So maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and yeah, the idea.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me on, Eric. It's an absolute honor to be on your show. Yeah, just a little bit about Prelo. I mean, it's targeted at early stage founders and micro businesses, right? And what we're trying to create is the easiest and most affordable way for them to discover new customers. And those customers are customers that they wish to do business with. So, there are other products out there, but our USP is the fact that it's affordable and it's targeted at micro businesses that are looking to do business with early stage or rather growth startups. So if you think about you as a founder and you try to I guess run a startup company or whatever, the biggest challenge, and this is something that we've found through our journey, is finding traction. And ultimately, the problem that Prelo solves is the ability for you to connect with startup founders who are at a later stage and more in a growth stage in order for you to build your business.
Right, so that sounds really exciting. So tell me about it. How did the idea come about? Was this based on your experience, something you come across, or what was that point where you're like, there's got to be a need for this kind of product out in the market?
Yeah, no. So, I mean, an interesting one was, we actually built Prelo in 4 weeks, right? It was built more out of frustration. It was born really out of a business startup that we had created before. And that startup was Stay Hired. And Stay Hired was a platform that was a video hiring AI platform. And it was supposed to connect startup jobs with job seekers. So that was really where we started. And if you can imagine, when you build something like Stay Hired, the whole idea with that was for us to, create an ecosystem where startup companies came onto the platform and submitted their jobs, and we were able to get, job seekers who were interested in those jobs. Now, the frustration was because that Stay Hired was a two-sided marketplace. It was very difficult in actually, bringing both parties to the table at the same time. And if you can imagine, startups typically, depending on what stage they are, don't have the funds to be able to hire at the pace that that would make sense for us. So if you can sort of take a step back and think, okay, because of that, we faced some challenges. We had to then build some integrations and some systems to try and identify those startups that had the money and try and identify those startups that were hiring. But by the time we did that, we just thought, hey, there is actually a product here that could help other businesses identify, I guess, identify customers for them. So we basically created these signals out of a lot of the data that we already built for Stay Hired to try and help us. So short form, I guess, is we were trying to solve a problem for ourselves and then stumbled upon a solution for a wider, audience.
Right. That's great. So tell us a little bit about the platform as well. Like how would it work for like a new person onboarding, or how would it exactly help them?
Yeah, so one of the things that we focused on, and I think this is very important, especially when speaking to early stage founders, is to be very clear on the kind of data that we were holding within the platform. And we are specifically finding startups that have just recently raised in the last 12 months or 18 months, or startups that are raising right now. The reason that we're doing that is because those startups are at the start of their growth phase, and they are going to be the ones that your services are most likely going to be of interest to them. Because here's the thing, as a startup founder, once you've raised investment, what's the next thing? You need to grow. You need to grow. You need to grow very quickly. You need to hire people. You need to, hire developers. You need to hire consultants. You need to, you just need to get the train moving. And the part of the reasons why you need to get the train moving is because in 3 months' time, you need to give feedback to your investors, right? You need to tell them how much you've done, where you are. So these trigger points are or at least these data signals are the data signals that we have used to build, to build Prelo off the back of. Specifically, though, to answer your question, if you think about how we, how this is going to help, this is going to really sort of help micro businesses that are looking to find decision makers in these companies, right? They're going to be able to get on the platform, find, contact information, find LinkedIn information, and be able to start building their own network within this startup space. Because here's the thing, a lot of startup founders start building a startup, but they may be surrounded by other startup founders, but more often than not, those startup founders are roughly in the same sort of stage that they were in. Which means those aren't your target audience. Your target audience are the startups that are a step further, a step ahead of you. These are people, raising Series A's, raising Series B's. Those are the people that you want to be engaging with as an early stage startup founder. And those are the people that we have on the Prelo platform, or rather that information is the information that we have on Prelo platform.
Right on. Yeah, that really makes sense, because I really love your point about like startups going after the right target audience, right? Because if I'm an early stage startup founder, right, chances are, if my connection is also early stage, they're not my customer, right? So you have to go after customers that have the budget to,
absolutely,
right, connect with your solution, connect with your product. So that's why I love what you're building, because it really helps them connect and discover those discover those startups that could be potential customers, right?
Exactly.
And also saves them hours of researching, Googling, going on 10 different platforms, right? To see, okay, which startups just raised money, or read the news event, right? So
read Twitter.
Exactly. There's it gets really crowded out there, right? So I think that's really great. And I think that's one thing startups should focus on. So maybe talk about what should startups be thinking in terms of their ideal customer profile? Who should they, go after, or any tips you may have in terms of figuring out the right target audience in terms of helping them?
Yeah. Sure. So for me, I think one of the failings that we had with Stay Hired as well was that we didn't really do enough research in terms of really niching down on who we should be targeting. I think as a startup founder, you should be very comfortable with offending some people, because that is so important. If you're trying, even for Prelo at the moment, right? It's still not tight enough. If you look at our homepage, we still kind of have, one sort of arm out welcoming job seekers. If we were going to be super tight, and I think we are going to be doing that once we finish the beta phase, job seekers are just a distraction. Job seekers are users, right? They're not generating revenue towards the for the company. So for the short advice to startup founders here is be comfortable not serving everybody. Be comfortable offending people. Be comfortable to say, I'm sorry, this is not for you. That is really how to make sure that you truly niche down on who your target audience is. And I guess if you think about it, you've kind of try and work backwards, right? Even if you say, okay, I mean, I'll give you an example with what we're trying to do. When we created, Prelo, we thought, okay, Prelo can be used by everybody. Well, great. If it can be used by job seekers to find companies, it could be used. But really, the people that we want to be using Prelo are micro businesses and early stage founders. Those are the people that have the problem that we're trying to solve. And that problem is, how do I get to my 10 customers, first 10 customers? How do I get to my first 20 customers? Those people are people that are providing services or providing a product to, to other businesses. So, I mean, I guess that's kind of my focus there is, you really, niching down is so important, and you really have to be comfortable offending, people. Be comfortable saying, I'm sorry, this is not for you. Because you've got to think about it from a business perspective. You've got to be able to. Sorry, we probably need to pause.
Oh, okay, no worries. It's okay.
Yeah. So from a business perspective, you've got to really be able to say, hey, this is not for these guys. This, it's specifically for people that are doing A, B, and C. Because if you're unable to do that, you're unable to interest an investor or convince an investor that you fully understand what it is that who your product actually serves.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I like the point about offending some people, right? Like, it almost reminds me of, that saying that says, like, if you're not pissing anyone off, you're not doing anything important, right? Like,
absolutely.
It sounds ridiculous, but actually for founders, it's so true, right? Because you have to niche down. And I think one of the biggest mistakes I see as well is that, founders try to boil the ocean, right? And I've been there too. We think the product is just for everybody. And guess what? Let's go to market to everybody, then there's nobody, right? like it's almost very tempting to think about it. So I 100% agree with you on that. It's always best to start niche. And then as your niche grows, if you dominate that niche, guess what? We can always find another niche or build up upon it, right?
Exactly. Even if you think you're exactly, I was just going to say, even if you think you're niche, you're still not niche enough. You need to even find a deeper niche.
Right.
And the reason why is that you, by creating such a tight niche for yourself, you're removing competition. It means that you're really super focusing on a particular group of people. And you're also then able to understand some of the micro trends and macro trends, more importantly, within that particular niche. So if you're providing a product for salespeople and you are trying to sell to every salesperson out there, you're not truly understanding at a deeper level, say for example, how many clicks it takes for them to close a deal, or how many touch points it takes for them to close a deal, because you're solving for everybody. However, if you were solving a problem for salespeople who specifically sold events platforms, or who specific, you will know very quickly what their specific pain points are, and how many clicks they're taking at the moment to get to where they need to.
Right, that makes sense. Moving on to the next questions. What are some things you wish you knew, when you started the startup? What are some tips that might come across?
Oh man, you're
probably
solving
so many, right?
There's so many, but you're helping us with one of them at the moment, right? And one of them for me is the creation of a community. I think community over product. And this whole thing about if you build it, they will come. It's not the case in the startup space, not anymore. That was probably 2000. This is 2021 now. And so for me, it's really around building a community, building relationships before building the product. That if you're not doing that, but you're not, you will find a lot of challenges ahead. And what you tend to find is tech founders typically are more focused on delivering features than they are of actually solving sort of real business problems. And as a result, they're not very open to engaging with people and building communities. And because of that, they end up building a product in complete isolation. And by the time they finished building the product, Time has moved on, and somebody else and also realized that they've got nobody to, they've got no advocates, right? They've got
Right,
nobody to
right,
cheer them on. They've got nobody to
right.
engage. So that's one of the big differences between building, I guess, building Stay Hired and building Prelo. Two
Hmm.
differences really.
Right, right.
One, you know, I say this a lot, done is better than perfect.
Hmm.
Keep it super simple, KISS, and really just, focus on building relationships. That's why we're having this conversation now. Engage with people, talk to
Right,
people.
right.
Your idea is only 1% of the solution. The 99% of it is execution, of which
Right.
majority of that is actually building enough cheerleaders, enough advocates who would say,
Right.
yeah, I like what you're doing.
Hmm.
Let's talk about you.
Right, right. Yeah, because I think these people like advocates, like you mentioned, is so important, right? They amplify your message. They amplify, your distribution channels. They really help you get more users or customers, right? Depending
Absolutely.
on what you're building. But I think that's one of the key things is they extend your reach, right? These people, right?
Mm-hmm.
The cheerleaders for your product, for your
Absolutely.
startup. And that's why I 100% agree with you on focusing on community, focusing on the audience first. And some times ago, it was okay. You could build the product because there wasn't that many websites out there, right? But today it's very
Correct.
noisy out there, right? It's even noisier than ever. It's like almost there's billions of websites out there, even in whatever space you're building. Like chances are there's so many, right? But I 100% agree with you. It's about having that audience. It's about delivering those value-added content, and at the same time with the product, solving their problems, figuring out what's their goals and aspirations. So I can totally relate on that for sure. Yeah, that's great. So talk about, of course, I see you on Twitter. You're active. You give out a lot of tips and share many stories. And I came across one of your tweets recently. You mentioned about like your supporters or your customers even being outside your city and potentially global. So maybe talk about that. Why is it good for founders to think about globally?
Interesting question. I think for me, one of the reasons, one of the things I noticed very quickly, and this was coming from from one of my failings, right,
Hmm.
is that, for example, if you look at the UK and presumably, I'm sure the same with Canada,
Hmm.
the recruitment industry is probably highly saturated, right?
Right.
you know, you have a lot of recruiters trying to present candidates for the same jobs. So there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of eyes on on one particular job and specific
Right.
candidates and
Right.
so on. And the impact, I guess, the drawback that creates is if you're coming to the market with a product that's supposed to catch or interest recruiters, they are already set in their ways. They
Hmm.
have no time to engage with your product because
Hmm.
they're barely struggling to,
Right.
they're barely meeting their deadlines, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, take that same product and go to a less developed country
Hmm.
or less developed,
Right.
technologically developed country, and look at the difference in engagement that you will get also
Right.
from recruiters. They are looking for new things. They
Hmm.
have different challenges.
Right.
So one of the, and this is a test that we did, when we finished, sort of building Stay Hired, we looked at London. We realized that everybody's trying to get a meeting with a recruiter, a recruitment agency, or a startup,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
But hey, what people failed to understand was you also had the Philippines out there, and they
Right.
were providing services, offshore recruitment services into London.
Hmm.
So we were able to reach out to them, and they were more inclined to listen to us because we were coming from the UK.
Right. Right. Right.
So
Interesting.
for me, the ability to think outside of the box and to approach countries or countries that aren't necessarily local to you as a founder is so important because there's so many different experiences. And for the product that you're trying to create, you just need to think who else could be interested in this, and not necessarily create a product that's only specific to your locale. What that creates is a ceiling for you that you then have to address at a later date. Because going to an investor and saying, oh, the product is created solely for people in Toronto or people in Canada does not excite the investor, because they sort of think, well, okay, so what happens when all of the people in Canada, all of the people in a particular locale have started using this? What happens then? You know, so that's for me. It's super important to be able to engage with, other countries, other cities, and we're living in the 21st century, for crying out loud, right? You know, you can't, especially with the pandemic, with coronavirus and so on, you can't be a startup that is only serving their city. Well, you can't be that startup that's serving just their country. You need to think so much bigger. How do you do that? There are various hacks that you can do. I'm sure you probably know. Go on to things like, Google Trends. Look at what people are searching for related to your organization, to the type of startup that you're creating, right? Look at where some of those searches are coming from, and you can then delve a little bit deeper into understanding why some of those searches are coming from there, to then say, right, okay, perhaps this is a country that I should be looking to push my service into.
Right. That's such a key, right? Thinking global from day one, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and also I think there's it's a good way to potentially reach customers, right? Like, because I think oftentimes, as founders, we're just thinking locally, right? We're just thinking about our city. If I'm in Toronto, I'm just going to only serve, locally here, and the other thing as well is, the local startup scene, chances are it might suck, right? Like, you might not be in a good, like, startup ecosystem, like, depending, like, where that founder might be, it's just their city might not be having the resources or the ecosystem, versus, with online right now, we got so many possibilities, right? And I think that's why it's exciting.
Absolutely, 100%. Just to touch on your point in terms of the local, resources may suck. Exactly. Or there may be a certain format there that doesn't quite fit what you're trying to do. And it's also, to some degree, a level of cronyism within certain ecosystems, because investors may only be interested in investing within other in other founders who have been successful in a particular space, rather than, do you see what I mean? And then what that creates is, even though you're coming up with something fresh and something interesting within that locale, you can't really grow it, because you have no real currency. You haven't exited. You're not engaged with the right investor. And almost what then happens is these serial founders are creating a monopoly where you're unable to get off the ground, because you're just because you're in an environment that is that's been stifled by stifled by the success of a few founders.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, those are great tips for our audience. So any other tips for our founders that maybe just starting out? Any short tip you may have?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the things I mentioned, I think I told you about, how I started off with a 35-page pitch deck. That was bizarre.
Right.
That was crazy, and it was really just down to not having the right people on to advise and so on. Managed to now get that down to 2 pages, and that works perfectly. It works so well, because investors can quickly see what the offering is. They see what problems you're trying to solve, what solution is, what the differentiating factor is, and so on. Another thing that I would say to people is, if you're going to create a full deck, it shouldn't be more than 8 pages long, really. And unless your founding team are ex Microsoft or Y
Right.
Combinator alumni,
Google.
or ex
Right.
Google or
Right.
ex
Right. Makes sense.
Uber, you need to stick your team information right at the back,
Right. Makes
because
sense.
there's no value in
Right.
having your team information on the front page.
Mm.
Stick it at the back.
Right.
That's very, very important.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably, and then just broadly speaking, I usually go with things like done is better than perfect,
Right. Right. I love that one. Yeah. Right.
and try as much as possible to quickly collide your ideas with reality. What I mean
Right.
by that is this: if you're thinking about creating an app for a service, well, provide the service first. Think about the app later.
Right. Love it. Love it.
Actually provide the service, whether you have 2 or 3 people who are in the engine room actually making the service operate, then great, just do that. Get
Right.
enough
Right.
people on board interested, and
Validate
then
quickly, right?
absolutely,
Right.
absolutely,
Right.
absolutely fail
That,
fast.
right. That's great. So for our audience that want to learn about the platform, where can they go? How can they get in touch with you? So.
Oh yes, very, very easy. Because we're in beta stage at the moment, I say register on Prelo.io.
Prelo.io. Okay, great.
Prelo.io,
Yeah.
register on there.
Yeah.
You would get an email from myself and access to my personal email address. And
Amazing.
that's the quickest way for you to get in touch with me.
Amazing. All right. Sounds great. Well, thank you so much again for taking the time to come out. And yeah, I'm so excited about the new chapter and spreading the word about what you're doing. And we can't wait. So thanks again.
Thanks very much.